All right, here we go. What's up, everyone? Thanks for stopping back by Jesse's Occupational Awareness Show. Appreciate every single one of you. I do apologize about the lighting today. I got window and window over here, but man, we ain't seen sun in about 3 days here in town. It's been raining, which we did need some rain, but I typically depend on the sun for my ambient lighting until I get better at doing these videos, get better equipment. So for now, this is what we're gonna have to deal with, but we'll get through. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I typically, not typically, most all of my content, all of my content has so far been related around working at the prison. I did a couple of videos about my joining the Marine Corps. Didn't get a whole lot of views on it. Don't think there's a lot of interest in that. So if there's not going to be a lot of interest in it, then I'm not going to talk about it because, well, if you're not going to watch it, then why bother with it? Today's video is going to be a little bit different. One of my earliest viewers and probably the most loyal, devout, repeat viewer has asked that I do a special video. Today is her birthday, so shout out to you. Happy birthday. Happy Columbus Day, by the way. And I really hope that this day is going great for you. Hope you're getting lots of cake, lots of presents, and although I don't know you personally, I hope that you're getting everything that you want for this birthday. So shout out to you. Really appreciate you being a loyal viewer. Probably the most loyal one that I have. You comment all the time. It really helps me keep going during these videos. You gave me a couple of shout outs when I was going through my COVID bout, when I couldn't hardly talk. So that helps. I really appreciate that. You've always been positive. So today, this video is for you. I had asked yesterday, what kind of video would you like to see for your birthday? And you had asked about a video involving me, who I am, where I've been, and how I got here. Initially, I said I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't too sure how I would go about getting from where I was to, well, how I am right here, right now. But after thought, consideration, I said, I'm doing this channel not for me, for the viewers. And if the most loyal one wants a video about me, that's what you're going to get. So today's topic will be about my favorite subject, me. We already know what my name is, so we'll skip over that part. How I began and how I got to here. Okay, let's paint that journey. Start with, I was born and raised in Texas. My accent should give it away. Moved around a little bit when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. Lived in Nebraska for a little while, lived in Arkansas, made our way back down to Texas, and I graduated high school in 1998. I joined the Marine Corps just about right after that. I graduated in May. I went to the recruiter's office in August. There was the delayed entry program back in the day. I had to wait from August to January to go to the Marines. From January 1999 to January 2003, I was in the Marines. I was stationed at Cherry Point, North Carolina, engineering detachment. After 9/11, I already had orders to go over to Okinawa, but even if I didn't have orders, we were all going to end up going overseas eventually. I spent the next year and a half over in Okinawa, Japan, deployed over to the Philippine Islands, was involved in Operation Enduring Freedom Philippines. Got to see quite a few interesting situations. Let's not get into it on here. It came time for me to re-enlist, and I wanted to re-enlist, but I wanted a change of MOS. It was very common for the Marine Corps to not give you the MOS that you thought you were supposed to get upon joining, and a re-enlistment bonus was a change of MOS. I wanted to be military police. I thought it would be a lot of fun. Got to see what they did around base. Of course, all that's different now. 9/11 changed everything, especially military police and their role after terrorists started getting captured. But that wasn't the thing at the time. They patrolled bases and walked tall, carried a big stick, as we said. So I wanted to re-enlist as military police. Well, the retention staff sergeant, that's the individual that does your processing, gets you re-enlisted, works through your change of MOSs. I'm sure it's different now. We're talking 2003. He said that because my MOS, being in engineering, was designated combat support, no re-enlistment, no change of MOSs were being allowed at the time. I said, so let me get this straight, Staff Sergeant. You won't let me change MOSs, which would allow me to stay in the service, retain my services, but you will allow me to discharge and get out completely altogether and lose my services. He said, Corporal, that's correct. I said, roger that, Staff Sergeant. I was discharged. Went back home to Texas, January 2003. Bummed around for a couple of months. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a cop, but I was really ready to just decompress. Prior Marines have to learn how to be civilians again, and sometimes we never really do. I say we because there are elements of that life that have never left me and never will. Just is what it is. And that's just one thing. Not to mention nagging injuries that my body's going through the older I get. Yeah. Try not to get old as best you can and take care of your body. It remembers every slip, trip, and fall that you take. So I bummed around for a little while. I applied with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, and it didn't take very long for me to get hired on. I hired on as a jailer. Jailer being another term for county corrections officers. Now, there's a difference. There's 3 levels. There's county corrections, state corrections, federal corrections. County corrections, these are individuals that the police arrest and take to jail. It's usually, at least where I was at this point, they were taken to the county jail, and this is where they were waiting to be sentenced, tried, and go on from there. Everything from failure to pay child support, writing bad checks, public intoxication, reckless driving, whatever. Whenever someone got arrested by the police, this is where they went. They were waiting to be housed and sentenced. That was where I worked for a little while. The next step, the videos that I've done for this whole channel, TDCJ, these are individuals who've already been to trial, they've been convicted, and they've been convicted of a felony. A felony is a category of, say, murder, robbery, burglary. It's not writing a bad check, failure to pay child support, public intoxication, speeding. Those are misdemeanors. So TDCJ, where I work, stories I'm talking about that, these are all individuals who have been convicted of usually many heinous crimes, not simple misdemeanors. Where I'm going with that, working in the jail wasn't bad. I worked the night shift. I absolutely hated working the night shift. I was just out of the Marines. I was young. I wanted to run, gun, fight. I was an instigator. I got into it as many times as I could with inmates, a lot of times by my own causing. I'm not saying that's right. That's just who I was at that time. I was extremely hot-headed. 10 foot tall, bulletproof, as they say. So I did that for a while. The only times I got to work on the day shift was when I would fill in for overtime. We would get a lot of overtime. A couple of people have commented about mandatory overtime on TDCJ, working at the county. Usually about an hour before shift would switch over. I worked the 11 to 7 shift around about 5 a.m., 6, something like that. Radio broadcast would go out from the supervisor. We need 3 officers to stick behind for the day shift. If interested, call the supervisor's office. If no one called in, they had a list. and they went down that list. And if you were next up on it, the phone rang in the dorm, you picked it up, Officer Carter, B, upper dorm, whichever one it was. I worked for Lieutenant Beetle. It'd be Lieutenant Beetle. Hey, Carter, you're next up on the overtime list. Roger that, LT. Where do you think you want to work? Put me in the rec yard. Man, we had been awake from 11 to 7. You're sleepy, you're tired. It was tough to go back into a dorm and run the risk of starting to fall asleep. I liked working in the rec yard where the inmates would move around, so I'd always request that. All right. Not going to get into much of what went on with me in the sheriff's department. Just know that the job didn't work out for me, particularly because of the attitude that I had at the time. I was a know-it-all. I was very hot-headed. Yeah. So, how did I get to here? Well, look back into history. 2005, hurricane season is awful down in the Gulf of Mexico. I lived right on the border of Texas, Louisiana, right at the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico, probably about 45 miles from it, give or take. Hurricanes are awful there. Hurricane Bonnie in 1996, Hurricane Andrew, 1995. The worst one, I was kids, Lord. I was a kid when those hurricanes happened, so didn't really have much of an impact. I let my parents deal with it, and I just went with them. By the time Hurricane Katrina and Rita had hit, I was an adult. I was in between jobs, and we had to evacuate our area. Those hurricanes were absolutely devastating to the area. We ended up evacuating to Shreveport, Louisiana. We stayed at a Campground of America campsite. And while we were there were a couple of Coast Guardsmen that were there as well. They were ITs, information technology specialists. Noticed them sitting outside their camper one day while I was taking a walk. Said, "Hey, what's up, guys?" They said hi. We started talking a little bit, went over to them, introduced myself. They come over to the trailer one evening. We grilled some burgers. Hey, I think the Coast Guard might be kind of interested. Could you guys tell me about it a little bit? Well, they told me from their perspective of the IT work of it, which was all computer-based. Thought it was cool. Well, around about that time, we still had connectivity in that area. We only got rain there. Everywhere else was getting the shit kicked out of it, pummeled. And the Coast Guard really came into favor there in New Orleans when they were doing the rooftop rescues from the helicopters. People that didn't evacuate, the water level was rising. They were on top of their roofs. They couldn't go anywhere. Coast Guard helicopters were coming, lowering baskets, rescuing these people. And I remember looking at this going, this looks like the coolest thing in the world. After we all got settled, got back to where we were, I looked up the Coast Guard on the internet, and there was the caption: "Do you dream of a career in maritime law enforcement?" Yes. And I took the Kool-Aid and just drank it straight up. Called the recruiter. He was like, man, he was an SK, storekeeper, SK1 Green. Told him, man, I'm ready to join, sign me up. Long story, went through the process. I still owed 2 years inactive service to the Marines. Those who join the military, you join initially for 8 years. Your first 4 years is going to be on active duty. Your next 4 years, if you don't re-enlist, inactive duty. That's the time that you can be recalled to active service if you're needed. There are situations where you can be granted a conditional release to allow you to join another branch of service, another federal agency. However, the Marine Corps is still giving me the green weenie. They weren't allowing me to discharge. So, they wouldn't give me my change of MOS, nor would they let me go so I could join the Coast Guard. Thanks. I asked him, so what can I do? He said, well, you're in the Port Arthur area. There's a Coast Guard auxiliary. That's the civilian component of the Coast Guard, the volunteers. There's an auxiliary unit there. You could work with them. You don't get paid. It's volunteer, but it'll expose you to it. And once your contract's up, call me back. We'll go from there. I said, okay, roger that. So I worked with the auxiliary for the next year or so. Had a good time with those guys. And come January 2007, called the recruiter. Actually, the day I discharged, January 26th, I called the recruiter. This guy had already transferred out. There was a new one. AMT, Aviation Mechanical Technician, First Class Lopez, was the one that I was doing business with. He'd been in the Coast Guard for approximately 6 years. He was already a first class, and he was a recruiter. Cool. I won't go into the specifics of recruiting, but just know that I just about had to burn the building down to get in. He was probably the worst recruiter that there could be. I had to call and hound him. I'm pretty sure the only reason I got in was because I had already talked to every other recruiter that was in there, as well as the RCC, the recruiting chief. I think they got together at some point and said, we got to put this guy in or he's not going to stop calling the office. Now, it wasn't like it was joining the Marines in Beaumont, where I was about 10 minutes down the road from it. The nearest recruiting station was in Houston, which was approximately an hour drive for me. So, it took from January to July 2007 for me to get into the Coast Guard. Yay. Because I was prior service, I went through a prior service boot camp program. It's different now, but at the time, it was a 2-week program that prior service individuals would go through, run us through, give us a good introduction, and then once we graduate, we get assigned to our units. Well, I was assigned to MSU, Marine Safety Unit, Port Arthur, Texas, as a port security specialist. I was waiting to go to Port Security Specialist A school in Yorktown, Virginia. In the Marines, Army, Air Force, they're called MOSs. That's your job specialty. In the Navy and the Coast Guard, they're called ratings. Bosun mate, gunner's mate, storekeeper, culinary specialist. At the time, Port Security Specialist is now Maritime Enforcement Specialist. So I was waiting to go to Port Security A school. While I was working at my unit there at the MSU, I was a reservist. After the first month of doing my duty there, I was offered active duty orders. The unit was doing that because they were doing a lot of escorts of merchant ships that were coming in and out from overseas. They were bringing in military cargo over to Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, all those areas that we were in theater with. When they would get in the restricted waters, they needed protection. So the Coast Guard would send out boats with armed up crews, and we were their protection. Well, that was a pretty big duty back then. Not anymore. We're no longer, quote, at war anymore. But a bunch of reserves were being recalled to active duty to do that particular job. I said, okay, yeah, that sounds like a real good gig. I'll take that. So October of 2007, I accepted my active duty orders and started working there at the unit. Well, I really liked being on the boats. And I said, man, I'd rather do this than port security specialist. So I talked to my chief. I asked him, could I switch up my A school orders, which I was set to go to Training Center Yorktown in Virginia in 2008. I asked him, could I switch up to bosun mate orders? He said, are you sure this is what you want to do? I said, yes, chief, it is. So we switched up my orders, and in April 2008, I came through Training Center Yorktown to bosun mate A school. Graduated. Now we're a third class petty officer is a BM3. We all have letter designates. A bosun mate is a BM, a gunner's mate is a GM, a yeoman is a YT, storekeeper, SK, so forth and so forth. Third class petty officer is a BM3. Second class BM2, first class BM1, chief petty officer, so forth and so forth. I graduated from there as a BM3. From 2007 to 2012, I worked there doing that mission. I made BM2 a year later. That's an E5 petty officer. Around 2012, there were a lot of bad politics going on at the unit. There were some scandals, some controversies. It would take me too long to really get into it. I intended that for a whole nother portion of Jesse's occupational awareness. I've just gotten stuck telling prison stories that everybody seems to like. I haven't branched out much into it. Plus, I don't want to tell any kind of negative Coast Guard stories while they're still my active employer. I can't. So in 2012, I said, man, I think I've had about enough of this. So I requested to go back to the reserve duty. I was originally assigned to the MSU there in Port Arthur. Because I had switched rates to bosun mate, I had been assigned to the reserve unit in Sabine Pass, Texas. Sabine Pass is about 20 or 30 miles or so from the MSU there in Port Arthur, not very far away. The station's located about 14 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. It borders the Texas-Louisiana border. Its areas is Sabine Lake, Sabine Neches River, and the Gulf of Mexico. Neighboring area would be Lake Charles to the east. To the west, you got Houston, Galveston, and on inland from there. So in July of 2012, I went back to being a reservist. Well, reservists don't make a whole lot of money, and I didn't have an active job at the time. I had already resigned from the sheriff's department, had done odd jobs in between there. So I went back to the sheriff's department. I reapplied with them. I also applied with TDCJ. And as my story goes, I was hired by TDCJ approximately, I think it might have been about 3 or 4 months. It actually took a pretty good while. I'm understanding now you can do it online and just about be hired the next day. In 2012, it wasn't like that. Okay, so times have changed. From 2012 to 2015, I worked at the penitentiary. I was also a drilling reservist. That means once a month on a weekend, usually either the second or the third weekend, I'd go in for Saturday and Sunday, do my duty at Sabine Pass, and go home. And then the summertime, we would do our 2 weeks. The state did give me the time off. We had our 4 on, 4 off schedule. If there were 2 days I was scheduled to work, I was given the time off with pay, as well as collecting my comp time, my sick time. The supervisor didn't like it. Jones, he hated giving me the time. Lieutenant Raymond, he was cool about it. I think he is a reservist. We never talked much about it. He kind of alluded to it one day, but we never really got quite that personal. So I was given the time. If it happened to be on 2 of my days that I was off, oh well, no time off for Jesse. 2015, I had enough of working at TDCJ. We're not going to get into it in this video. I resigned in April of 2015, and I started the active duty process. I really wanted to go back on active duty. In December 2014, a message had come out that bosun mate was critical, meaning there's not enough bosun mates in the Coast Guard. If reserves are interested in making the jump from reserve to active duty, you can do so and keep your pay grade. Typically, if you were a fairly high-ranking reservist and you came in active duty, you lost a couple of pay grades. You had to work your way back up to it. This was one of those exceptions. So me and a really good buddy of mine, he watches this content, he knows who he is, I'll leave his name out. We started the process together, and both of us integrated active duty. From May, that was when I had resigned from TDCJ, in April, and in May of 2015, I was brought back full active duty in the Coast Guard. I was a bosun mate, second class, still am for now, and I was assigned to Sabine Pass, Texas. From 2015 to 2020, I did my duty there. It came time to transfer in late 2019, early 2020. I met with what's called the detailer. The detailer is an affectionate term for assignment officer. These are the individuals who ultimately determine the next unit that a member is going to go to. And I told him what I would like to do. I worked with a couple of guys. I'll leave their names out as well. One of them watches this video. He's an engineer. He knows who he is. He's commented a couple of times. I love his YouTube handle. And they always spoke highly about Training Center Yorktown. Typically, when discussing other units, you'll usually hear F this, F that, here's what's wrong with the unit. Oh yeah, here was a couple of nice things. But usually you would always hear the bad. Training Center Yorktown, from the 3 guys I knew that were stationed there, had nothing bad to say about it. They said that they hated leaving had to basically get dragged away, and if they could do it again as their next unit, they would. So it was on my radar. Came time to transfer. I met with my detailer, and the detailer said, Carter, you need to get underway. A ship in the Coast Guard is called a cutter. Anything over 65 feet in length is a cutter. That's a ship. The largest ones at one point were 378 feet. I believe they go up to 420 right now. Correct me if I'm wrong. He said, Carter, you need to get underway. Put nothing short of 100 cutters on your pick list. I said, sir, no respect. Wow. Yeah, that would have got me. With all due respect, I'd really like to be an instructor. That's been on my radar for quite a while. I really think that would suit me. He said, well, you can do that, but you need seat time. Get underway. Roger that, sir. Came time for me to submit where I wanted to go. I picked a bunch of instructor billets. There's instructor billets in Yorktown. There's some in North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, Petaluma, California. I picked a bunch of those billets and a couple of local units and a few cutters just to have some diversity on my pick list. I was in January 2020. I received my orders. Bosun mate underway instructor, Training Center, Yorktown. I was ecstatic. I was so happy I got what I wanted. Likewise, I'd been in Texas for so long, I was scared to move. I mean, to me, Virginia may as well have been another planet. With as long as I had been in, sorry, I'm checking the time. With as long as I had been in Texas, I may as well have been another planet. At this point, COVID was on the rise. I was set to transfer I was supposed to leave Sabine Pass in July of 2020, and this was when COVID was at its absolute worst. Masks had been mandated. People were on a stay-at-home order. Everything was closed. You were there, you remember. If there could have been a worse time to move, it was then. But it was time to move. So, July, August last year, got on the road, got here to Hampton, Virginia, got settled into our house. I didn't even get to see the house before we moved in. We found it online, and I took the house without even knowing what I was moving into. So far, so good. Currently I'm assigned as an instructor here at Training Center Yorktown. This is going to put me at, unless things change, this should put me at my 20 years. I'll be able to retire, go back to civilian life from there. I don't know what I'm going to do when I retire. I got a couple of ideas in mind. I tell you what I ain't going to fucking do. I'm not going back to work for TDCJ. I would consider possibly a county corrections career. Maybe. I'm only getting older. It just is what it is. So how did I get into the YouTube business? Well, like everyone else, I discovered YouTube during its infancy, around 2006. Loved watching the videos, movies, all that. I think around 2000, I don't even remember what year it was, 16, 17, I noticed that there were a lot of prior inmates, that were doing their own channels. Joe Guerrero over at After Prison Show, Death over at 23 and 1, Jay Williams, Let's Live Life, Big Herc. Not all these guys all at once, but I discovered their channel and it was just them talking. Now, Joe Guerrero was the pioneer for the prison genre. He's still around. He has a ton of videos. These stories are told from the inmate perspective. They're typically not favorable towards corrections officers. As much as I'd love to be able to do a Q&A interview with one of them, I highly doubt that's ever going to happen. I don't think our personalities would really allow us to mesh well. But that was when I discovered podcasting. I'm an avid follower of a lot of the wrestling podcasts. Bruce Pritchard over at Something to Wrestle With, Eric Bischoff, 83 Weeks. I don't watch the current wrestling product. However, I love hearing those old stories from their perspective on the backstages. I got to thinking, man, YouTube, and yeah, maybe there's some money to be made in it. I don't care about making any money in it. If it happens, great. Otherwise, I'm doing this strictly for fun, entertainment, it's a good hobby. I got to thinking, man, how hard could it be? I'd stand in the kitchen, and while I'm cooking breakfast, I'd just start talking, start telling stories, talking about the prison, talking about the Coast Guard. And okay, cool. Well, first time I sat down with the camera, no, not easy. It's difficult. Part of the reason, if I look at me right now, I lose eye contact with you. Now I have eye contact with you, I can't see me. You have to look at the camera lens and not necessarily yourself. So one day I just started up the camera and I just started talking. And then I stopped it, deleted it, tried it again, and again, and said, I'm going to go ahead and take the plunge. I watched a couple of videos about how to get a channel going, how to get the basic process of it, video editing, all that. And I did my first video titled First YouTube Vid. Did my intro in it, second video, first day at the academy. I am not an overnight success at all. I'm very few subscribers. That's fine. The ones that are there, from what I'm getting at, they love the content. They at least love it enough to watch. So I made my first couple of videos. Great. You discovered me very early on, started making comments. More individuals started discovering me. Next thing you know, started this process in April. Here it is now, October. I believe I'm on my 37th, 38th video. I'm not exactly sure. And that's how I got from where I was in high school to where I am right here. I like doing this right here, just candid, raw, unedited footage. I don't have all the animatronics, animations, pop-ups on there. I haven't learned how to do all that. I haven't bought a bunch of camera equipment so far. This is just me talking to my phone here in the bedroom. I enjoy it. It's fun. I hope that everyone else enjoys it as much as I'm making these. I plan on making a lot more. And that's me. That's, in a nutshell, that's my story. That's how I got from high school, Marines, Coast Guard, to here. Once again, shout out to you, Ash. Happy birthday to you. I hope this is a great day for you. This is your day. Take advantage. Enjoy everything. Everyone else that's watched this video, this has been centered around her request. Once again, a deviation from our typical topic, but this was a birthday request. Happy birthday to you. Hope you've enjoyed your present from me. Take care. Look forward to seeing everybody on the next episode. We'll get it going back from there. Appreciate y'all.